Welcome back to the channel, you guys. Hopefully today you're having a great day. I'm having a perfectly fine day, I slept in today, woke up, made breakfast, cleaned up, took the trash out, just had a basic day off work. I've been off work for a while, so I'm kind of like just, living life without having any obligations lately, which I guess is a privilege, so I'm not taking it for granted. I'm very thankful for it. But today I did want to come and talk to you about a film I saw earlier this year called Sentimental Value. Sentimental Value stars Renata Rensby as Nora, Stellan Skarsgård as Gustav, Inga Id's daughter Lilius as Agnes. I always mess up that name, so I think I got it right then. And Elle Fanning as Rachel. And it's produced by Mere Film and Eye Pictures, written by Eskil Vogt and Joachim Trier, and it is directed by Joachim Trier himself. So what's my history with Joachim Trier? I don't really have an extensive history with Joachim Trier. I see Joachim Trier as a newcomer, buzzy director on the scene, kind of like in the same light as Celine Song and Zach Kreger. All three of them kind of just have two really noteworthy feature films in my opinion. So you have Celine Song, she has Past Lives, she has Materialist, and then you have Zach Kreger, he has Barbarian and he has Weapons, and then now you have Joachim Trier who has The Worst Person in the World and Sentimental Value. And so before seeing Sentimental Value, I hadn't seen The Worst Person in the World. I had heard about buzz about it when it was first coming out, but I never really gave credence to it or gave my attention to it. And so I just let it pass. I did know at the time that it starred Renata Rensby as well, but it just didn't capture my interest how it should have for me to actually give time to go see it in the theaters. However, after seeing Sentimental Value, I did go back and watch The Worst Person in the World. When did I see Sentimental Value? I actually went and saw Sentimental Value the first weekend of November, I believe, for an early screening. And I heard buzz about it online, and I saw there was a lot of Oscar buzz in regards to it as well. And Stellan Skarsgård is obviously in it, and Renata Rensby, she's beloved for her performance in The Worst Person in the World. So I was like, maybe I should go tap into that, see what that's about. It might become a film of contention for the big award season. And so I found an early screening, and I went to the early screening. Now, when I booked the early screening, I was one of three people who were in the theater at the time who had purchased tickets. So then when I came to the early screening, which was on a Wednesday, I think it was on a Wednesday, at 7 p.m. When I went to the early screening, the theater was packed out. There was every seat was filled. So that was really interesting to me, because I was wow, I didn't expect that many people to come out for it, you know what I'm saying? Especially on a Wednesday night, and for a film that's by a director who's not really that widely known, at least not in my opinion at the time. I feel now he's wider known, but I don't think everybody in the world knows who Joachim Trier is yet. But I think in that niche film space, a lot of people do know who he is. To give a quick overview of Sentimental Value, basically within this film, we follow a young woman, our lead protagonist named Nora, as she and her sister are dealing with the fallout of their mother's recent death. And the fallout that I'm speaking about is being what they will be doing with their childhood home that their mother has now left them with, right? But not particularly left them with. Basically, their deadbeat father, who is still technically married to their mother, has inherited the home that they have grown up in, and he kind of is in control of what happens with this house. So now that their deadbeat father has resurfaced in their lives after inheriting this home he once owned, they now have to deal with whatever his intentions are with resurfacing in his daughter's lives. And they come to find out that his intentions with resurfacing into his daughter's lives aren't as pure as he would want them to believe, right? What do I mean by that? Well, their father is kind of a famous, semi-famous, or let me say well-respected film creator in the international film scene, definitely the European film scene, right? And so he just recently had a very popping, buzzy documentary, I believe it was, or film. And so he's kind of been reignited into the zeitgeist as a legend, or somebody of very respectable status of a director in the world. And he now is coming back and proposing that he wants to do one more film for his career, because he is in his 70s and he is getting really old. And so he proposes to Nora, his oldest daughter, that he wants her to star in his upcoming film. And he presents her with this opportunity. Now, given that he abandoned Nora and her sister Agnes when they were Nora was probably 12 and Agnes probably was 6, Nora herself is not very receptive to this, because obviously he has been a deadbeat father. This is a film that deals with the dynamics that come around a parent abandoning their child and how a child has to then go about interacting with the parent who has abandoned them. On top of dealing with topics about like how abandonment affects a child, it also deals with like how unresolved childhood trauma can fully stunt grown adults, depression, suicidal tendencies, the landscape of Hollywood in a sense, kind of, and then like overall like the psyche of a deadbeat father, but not really. Not really. And so I think like the strengths within this film, obviously I think the strengths that are in this film are the strengths that are in The Worst Person in the World, in my opinion. I think that because the same people who are behind The Worst Person in the World, Joachim Trier and Casper Tuzin, who is a cinematographer, and I believe Eskil Vogt as well, aided in writing The Worst Person in the World. Those three people were behind that film, and those three people were also behind this secondary film. A lot of the strengths from The Worst Person in the World have translated over to Sentimental Value. So like, what strengths am I talking about? Obviously, as I just said, the cinematography, right? I really, really loved the cinematography and the visual work in The Worst Person in the World. I think it's a very gloomy film. It's a very evening film in my opinion. And I love the evening time because I'm a really like overcast person. I love like clouds. I love clouds and I love like sun that's like, touching clouds, or I love like really sunsetty vibes and things like that. And so I think in The Worst Person in the World, it really, really hits on that time of day and like the feelings that like consume you from that feeling outside. And so that translates over into this film kind of because this film's not really like a sunny film. And I don't know if like just in like Scandinavia or like Norway or like the, Sweden area, like they just don't get like really, really bright days. But this film feels like it's just on par with its setting as The Worst Person in the World was, right? And so then we also have like dim lighting. There's a lot of dim lighting that goes on in Worst Person in the World, but also in this film. And then you have like reflective lights a lot. It balances a lot of shadows, I think. I think what Casper Tuzin does really well is like shadows and a lot of like, negative spaces, in my opinion, when it comes to like lights and environment. Another strength of the film that I think translates over from The Worst Person in the World to Sentimental Value is the emotionality. Now, with The Worst Person in the World, we're dealing with, following like a young woman and how she's going about dealing with how she treats people in her life and just how she sees herself and what she wants to be and where she wants to go in life and how she values people and how she doesn't value people, right? And so it's a very deeply emotional film, and I feel like that translates over to Sentimental Value because it is a very deeply emotional film, Sentimental Value. It does deal with all the things that I just said it deals with, and like it does not exploit it, but it does flesh it all out like very, very, very thoroughly when it comes to like the actual emotionality, how you're feeling when you're watching it, what you're seeing, how the actors are, portraying these deep, hurtful and painful and strong and intense emotions. And so we can just go ahead and go over to the performances as well, because just like in The Worst Person in the World, the performances I think in that film are stellar. And I think the performances in Sentimental Value are also just as stellar, if not more. I think Renata Rensby, who is our protagonist in The Worst Person in the World, but also our protagonist in Sentimental Value, does just as great of a job, even better, in my opinion, in Sentimental Value. I think you have scenes in Sentimental Value, like, the opening scene, the theatrical scenes that Renata Rensby is able to try to convey her nervousness and her anxiousness when it comes to her performance, and then how she gets over that, and once she gets over that, how she just really can like explode on stage and really just captivate people in the audience of the theater, but also people who are watching the film as well. And then you go to moments where like she's very, very, solemn, and she's very alone, where she's like exercising, or like she's just talking to one person in a room, or she's like, in bed with her lover, or where she's just talking to somebody over the phone and things like that. And she's really able to convey, like, without having to do a lot, without having to like, crack her voice, without having to really like say too much, without really having to sound a certain way. She really can just convey that like she's deeply hurting. And I don't know where that comes from. I have no understanding of Renata Rensby's past, but she's doing a really, really great job at conveying such deep emotions, in my opinion. Then you have Inga Lilius, who plays Agnes here, who's Nora's sister, who's doing a great job. A supporting role, obviously, so she doesn't have a lot of screen time, but when she is on screen, she's really just taking it. Like, she's taking all the attention, or like, I should say, like, all the ability to really perform from everyone else who's there. When she's in the scene with Stellan Skarsgård, all the scenes she has with Stellan Skarsgård, but I think particularly the scene where she confronts Stellan Skarsgård about how he interacts with her child. I think that scene is like really, really, really impactful. And I think it's because the story kind of leads you to believe that she's like the child who is okay with her father's actions, but really she's not. She's just a child who has learned to like deal and cope with them better than Nora has, right? Because she wasn't fully shut out as Nora was from their father, Gustav. I also love the scene where she's consoling Renata Redze's character, Nora, who is, you know, depressed and really confused with how she feels about her father re-entering her life and what she should do with her life and what's going to go on with her career. And she's just consoling her. And I think how Inga really consoles her was really, really lovely. And how they displayed that was very, 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 very successful. And obviously you have Stellan Skarsgård, who's in this film as well, and he's doing a great job. But I feel like Stellan Skarsgård and Elle Fanning, they're not giving as much of a strong performance, in my opinion, as Renata Redze and Inga Lillies are. I think they're giving very well done performances, but maybe they also just didn't have a lot to work with, because I do think Elle Fanning is giving a better performance than Stellan Skarsgård here. I do think Stellan Skarsgård, out of all the lead characters or actors in this film, he's not giving the best performance, but I do think Elle Fanning is giving a better performance to him. I think the scene that I can look back on that I think like Elle Fanning really did what she had to do in this film is the dinner scene, or not the dinner scene, but they're in the kitchen at night when she comes to tell Gustav, Stellan Skarsgård's character, that she just cannot do this role, and she kind of breaks down. How she really, really like depicts how sorrowful she is and how remorseful she is, and how like let down she is in herself because she can't, you know, adopt this personality of the character on the paper, nor Gustav's mother, nor Gustav's daughter. And it's just it's so subtle of a scene, but it is very, very powerful, and I really do appreciate Elle Fanning's performance in that scene. And then you have Stellan Skarsgård, who I think is doing perfectly fine here. Obviously, Stellan Skarsgård has getting a lot of buzz for, you know, best supporting actor category, and I'm a little confused about it. Like I'm sorry, I'm a little confused about it. I love Stellan Skarsgård. Stellan Skarsgård, who I believe was in Andor this year, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Stellan Skarsgård plays Luthen in Andor. If you have not seen Andor, please go watch Andor. I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, so if you're not a biggest Star Wars fan, I totally understand why you haven't seen Andor, but I'm not a big Star Wars fan, and I think Andor is like one of the best television series that have been on television this year. So Stellan Skarsgård is giving a better performance in Andor and things I have seen him in prior to Andor than he is in Sentimental Value. Now, I haven't rewatched Sentimental Value, so maybe I need to look again and really pay attention to his performance. But from what I can remember, he's not really doing anything that just will make me want to like really say like, oh my gosh, he's giving a great performance, give him an award, right? However, I do think Stellan Skarsgård is doing a really good job at portraying just how selfish and narcissistic like absent fathers are. So that can lead us into my criticisms of the film, honestly, because I think those are all the great things that I think about the film. And there's more things that I think about the film that are great, but I don't want to go through every single moment of the film with you, right? Because then you'll be here for 2 hours with me, and I don't want to do that to you. I believe Sentimental Value is an extremely alluring film in the first 2 acts. And then the third act completely takes you out of interest with the story, in my opinion. And it fails to detect like the true experiences of what it means to remedy the rift between a father and a child, specifically a daughter in this instance, after abandonment has taken place on the father's side. Essentially, like it doesn't really execute the messaging for how to reconcile like abandonment between like, you know, the father who has abandoned a child and a child who has been abandoned in the best way, in my opinion. Like I said, this is a film about deadbeat fathers and how a child is supposed to reconcile with their deadbeat father. If you are like me and you have a deadbeat father like I do, I think you'll see this film, you'll understand my perspective on why I really didn't like think the messaging was successful in this film in regards to deadbeats. Because, and I'm talking about like actual people who have like deadbeat fathers, right? Because not people who have fathers like in and out of their lives. Because Nora is someone who just has a deadbeat father, right? He left her when she was 12 and he has not really returned to her life. When he returned to her life, it was only to snatch up Agnes and then go take her off and come back and drop her back off, right? So she fully was abandoned by Gustav. And if you're a person like me who was fully abandoned like your parent, and not someone like Agnes whose parents kind of like teetered back in and out of their life, a lot of people have like present but absent fathers, and it's not really the same as having like a full-on deadbeat father, okay? But walk with me. So when it comes to like the deadbeat father spectrum, right? On the low end of the spectrum, you have your low tier deadbeats, right? So these are about like 10% of the deadbeat population. And what do I mean by that? These are like your involuntary deadbeat fathers. And they're deadbeats either due to being incarcerated or the child that they had was stripped from them without their consent, right? For whatever reason, maybe it's like adoption, they were teenagers or something like that, or whatever reason. And this is like the smallest percentage of the deadbeat fathers. You know, they're not really like egregious, they're not really evil, they're not really mean. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have like your high tier deadbeat fathers. These are about 30% of the deadbeat father population, in my opinion. And these are like your extreme deadbeats, right? And so if they could press a button to like unalive their child that they don't want to raise, they would do it in a heartbeat, right? They would fully abandon their child. They want to. They have fully abandoned their children. Mentally, emotionally, financially, physically, spiritually, all of the above. They've cut off all ties to existing as a father in the world for the child that they don't want to have. These people are like evil, in my opinion. And then you have like that mid-tier of deadbeat fathers, right? So this is like, the mid-tier is like about 60% of the deadbeat population. And these are like your standard deadbeat fathers, right? They're willingly choosing to abandon their children because it like doesn't fit whatever narrative they have for themselves, or they're just evading responsibility in some general sense. However, like they're not really absolved from their identity as a father as like the high-end extreme deadbeats are. Like these people kind of are still attached to identity as a father. They're not fully writing off that they're a father in the world. And due to that, it kind of eats them up subconsciously to know that they like chose themselves over their children, because like you can't go about life acknowledging that you're a father and people don't ask like where your children are, you get what I'm saying? And then people are gonna look at you and be like, why are you not with your children? So then like subconsciously it eats them up in the head, and they have to make lies, or they have to just like omit things, or they have to just eat it up inside. And usually like they try to return to their child at some point in their life. Hence Gustav. So Gustav falls into like the mid-tier deadbeat category, okay? And so within the mid-tier deadbeat category where Gustav lies, right, he is a successful man, and he is quote unquote back in their life and trying, and he is here to offer them gifts, and he is here to make strides with them. However, where the film fails in regards to depicting this dynamic and what it will take to like reconcile such a, you know, abandonment space between Gustav and Nora is that it doesn't really give credence to the perspective of Gustav that I feel like it should. It feels like we are like a child who are looking at Gustav in this film. And when I say that, I mean like it feels like whenever we're looking at Gustav, he's always positioned in a position where like he's kind of like an upstanding person. And I know that like there's sometimes you could say like, oh yes, people who are deadbeat fathers, obviously to the world, there are other types of people. But we are supposed to be looking at this film, like Nora is our lead character. We're supposed to be looking at this film from Nora's perspective. And yes, there are parts in this film that like bluntly state that like Gustav is like an asshole, and he is narcissistic, and he is selfish, and he did abandon his children, and he's not to be forgiven for that. However, every time we're looking at Gustav, he's always, like I said, upstanding and doing things right. He's successful. He's at these meetings. He's doing these things like that. People love him. He's doing interviews with Netflix. You know, he has these actors in Hollywood like Rachel who are applauding him. He's going to meet all these people from Hollywood, and people that he's interacting with, they love him. He has all this money, and his grandchild loves him. And, you know, everyone except Nora and Agnes are the only ones who really see him for what he truly is, which is real to life. I will give Joachim Trier and Esquivel that. However, then when we flip the script, flip this camera over, and we look at Nora and Agnes, they're just so broken and they're so crippled. They're so broken, they're so crippled. And not really Agnes. Agnes kind of is, kind of isn't, but Nora is fully down for the count. Nora is like, she's previously tried to kill herself before because she's depressed in her life. But also, now that, you know, her father has come back into her life, she's more confused about her decisions now. She's more confused. She's more confused about how the dude she's dealing with treats her. She's more confused about how she performs as an actress. She's more confused about how she, you know, is connecting to her sister. She's confused about a lot of things. She's confused about her relationship with her mother to a certain extent. She's confused about so much. And so why is that an issue for me, right? It's because when you get to this third act, where Agnes goes and gives the script back to Nora. And she's like, I think you should read it. I think if you read the script, you will get the closure you want. You will understand him, and if you really do this part, I think you will really get through all the pain that you have. And then she does that, but we don't see that. We immediately cut from Nora reading the script to Nora, you know, filming on the last day on set of the film. And now she's reconciled with Gustav. And in my opinion, that's just not how situations like that work out. You don't just, you know, read something, read a letter, or read some type of excerpt about your abandoned deadbeat father's life, and then just think like, yeah, we can make up and get through this. Now, some people may do that. I'm not saying all people don't do that. Some people may do that, but in my opinion, that's not the right way to go about it, and it's not compelling or endearing at all. And especially when you don't show the work that they had to do to get there, because even prior to Agnes giving Nora the script, there was no work done there. The whole entire film, Gustav is spending trying to replace Nora. He's trying to replace Nora with Rachel. And he's trying to replace Nora in his life, kind of, and put her into the position of his mother, who I feel like Gustav kind of feels like he's the reason why his mother did what she did. And I kind of think that he's telling Nora like, oh, I think I understand you because I understand my mother, and I think you're going through the same things that my mother went through. And so if I wrote this for you, because if you could do this, it'll be like a cathartic, emotional experience for you, and it'll heal you, right? But it's also like, how do you know that? You don't know her. Like, you don't know her. And for me, it's honestly like kind of selfish. And then I know some people would be like, that's the point of it. That's the point of it. But in my opinion, it's like, dang, so if he's just selfish, and then we cut from, we just go through 2 hours of him being selfish, and then we cut to him just being forgiven for it, and everybody's cool with him. It's like, dang, like what's the message of that story then? And maybe I'm missing something. Let me know if I'm missing something. But to me, it just did not feel proper at the end of it for a story that's trying to convey the message of what it will take for a father who actually wants to be present in the children who's abandoned life later on in their life, and what work actually needs to be taken to be done to reconcile such thing. Like, yes, they're gonna be like, well, obviously there was time between like when she read the script and like when the final scene was filmed. Show it. I don't know. Do a 10-minute montage. I don't know. Give us one conversation. Give us one pure, honest conversation between Nora and Gustav, where Gustav actually comes to her and is really, really apologetic and really, really gives her the closure that she needs, and really allows for Nora to like forgive him. Why do we not get that in this film? It really just feels to me, honestly, like Joachim Trier wasn't really interested in that, or he just really didn't understand how to go about telling such a story. But he was really, really just interested in telling like a story about like, you know, the hardship that comes between like an estranged father and his daughter. And that's cool, but leave the film at being about an estranged father and his daughter, and don't go to trying to like make a story about how they reconcile and how you can get past things and get over this deep emotional turmoil that you have in regards to your parent literally abandoning you and then popping up and being like, I know what's best for you. Overall, like I said, I think this film is good until we get to like the final like third act, because it just felt like the first 2 acts we were on a good journey. We're in the car, we're on the trip, we're going on the drive, like we're on the tarmac and we're getting good pace, and then like we take off and like we just fly over everything that we kind of need to see to get to the landing point. And we kind of just like, it's like we all blacked out before the film took off the tarmac, and then we just like came back to when the film like landed. And to me, like that feels like I kind of was robbed of like a proper story. Anyone who loves this film, I'm not going to slight you. I'm not going to tell anyone that this film is bad. I don't think this film is bad. I think this film is just not as good as people purport it to be. And I think The Worst Person in the World is a more successful film than Sentimental Value. I do. I think Sentimental Value is not Joachim Trier's best film. I know a lot of people want to say that, because I think a lot of people too, like a lot of people walked away from this film and they were like, that film was therapy for me. That was just 2.5 hours of therapy. And I'm like looking at them like, how is that therapy? Like, how is it therapy? Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like people who have present but absent fathers look at this film as therapy. They look at it like, oh my gosh, this is what like I'm currently going through with my parents. But people who actually have like actual deadbeat fathers who haven't been present, you're not going to look at this film as endearing, in my opinion. You're going to look at it as if it's like ignorant. You're going to look at it as like, it doesn't really truly look at men, deadbeat men, how they should be looked at as, you know, vile people who are walking the earth. But hey, teach their own. Oscars talk. Let's talk about some Oscars talk, right? When it comes to this film, obviously like this film has been one of the buzziest films this year, in my opinion, in regards to the Oscars. It's been lauded with a lot of Oscar, like, you know, contention, and it's already gotten a lot of nominations for like preliminary award season award shows. And so I think like when it comes to the Oscars, I think this film is definitely going to get in Best Picture. It's definitely going to be nominated for Best Picture. I think this film is definitely going to get a nomination. I think Renata Rensby is definitely going to get a lead actress nomination. I think supporting actor Stellan Skarsgård is definitely going to get a nomination there. He's been getting nominations everywhere. He hasn't been winning though. though. Benicio del Toro has been taking a lot of the supporting actor categories in all of like the local and smaller award contention season, which is kind of like interesting to me because like I don't want Benicio del Toro to win. I would rather Selling Skarsgård win. I really want Delroy Lindo to get in there and win some things, but I really don't want Benicio del Toro to win because I don't feel like Benicio del Toro is giving like a better performance in one battle after another than Selling Skarsgård is in Sentimental Value. However, I digress on that right now. When it comes to Best Supporting Actress, obviously Inga and Elle have been in contention for that. I do think Inga deserves it more than Elle Fanning. I don't think Elle Fanning is giving nearly as, grand of a performance as Inga is here. A lot of people are like, oh, they're gonna get like 2 nominations. The same way people are thinking that like Benicio del Toro and Sean Penn are gonna get 2 noms for one film in a whole like main category at the Oscars. They're kind of saying that like Elle Fanning and Inga are gonna both get nominations in the Best Supporting Actress. That's not going to happen. It's going to be Inga and it's not going to be Elle. Elle hasn't even really been campaigning like that, and it's totally fine. Elle Fanning had a great year, in my opinion, so she should feel proud of herself even without that nomination. I do think the film is also going to get like Best Original Screenplay. I think the film is also going to get like Best International Picture nominations. I don't know if it's going to win. It's definitely not going to win Best Original Screenplay. It might win Best International Picture if The Secret Agent doesn't get that or No Other Choice. I think the biggest competition in international for Sentimental Value is The Secret Agent and No Other Choice. I think Joachim Trier is going to get Best Director nominations. He's not going to win. I think that it's either going to Ryan Coogler or PTA. And then technical categories, all the technical categories. I think all the visual categories are definitely going to get a nomination for, and I think the editing as well. So, but who knows? We'll see. March is a long way from now. In January, we will talk about the nominations. At the end of January, I believe like January 27th or January 23rd is when the Oscar nominations drop. And so, it's going to be very, very interesting times because then that'll be around like SAG award period, BAFTAs, all of that stuff. So, once the new year starts, we're really going to be hitting the road in regards to like the big Oscar conversation. So I'm really excited for that, honestly. And I'll be excited to see like what Sentimental Value takes home, because I do want them to take home a few things. I do think it is like, a good body of work. It just doesn't have a good third act, and it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth at the end. And if I'm being honest, the year 2025, there's been so many films. I think the year 2025 for me was an okay film year. It was not a really good film year. I don't think it was a good output year for film or television. And I think when it comes to film, one of the reasons is because there's just a lot of films this year that I feel like the third act just dropped the ball. I feel like there's so many films that like were really building up a lot of good momentum and a lot of good rapport in my heart as I'm watching them. And then the last 30 minutes or the last third act or so just really dropped the ball, and it just soured my taste with a lot of films. And so I really can't feel as positive about this year of film as I have with other years, honestly, if I'm just telling you the truth. That's my truth. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on Sentimental Value. Let me know how you feel about Sentimental Value in the comments. Let me know if you agree with me. Let me know if you don't. I know a lot of people really love this film, so I can believe that there are a lot of people who will be disagreeing with me. But let me know if you understand my perspective, because I think a lot of people aren't looking at it that way. I think a lot of people just go into this film really trying to just look at like the deep emotionality that's coming out of Renata Rensby, and that's enough for them. And I don't fault you for that. I think she's a wonderful performer, and I'm really, really ready to see what else she does with her career. As I always say, at the end of the day, I'm just a wannabe cinephile, and these are my thoughts. So I will catch y'all in the next video. Bye.